The French Foreign Minister and Egypt's President meet in Tunisia to discuss the Libyan conflict. A UN envoy warns of a devastating surge in attacks in the Sahel and West Africa. And costly traditional weddings in Nigeria are pushing young couples to embrace cohabitation. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Ramanyang with a preview of your business news.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Friends and colleagues of victims of the Ukrainian passenger jet that crashed in Iran are still coming to terms with the tragedy. And the World Bank has slashed global growth forecasts for 2019 and 2020. We'll look at the latest set of numbers in the course of the hour. For now, let's turn to Lindy for the latest in current affairs.
Thanks, Rama. In our top story, France's Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs is in Tunisia for an official two-day visit. Jean-Yves Le Drian arrived in Tunis from Egypt, where he met President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Jean-Yves Le Drian is visiting Tunisia at the request of French President Emmanuel Macron to meet with President Kais Saied and to discuss the situation in Libya.
The aim of Le Drian visit is to strengthen the political dialogue between Tunis and Paris and address current issues. Firstly, Libya, whose stabilization is a real priority for Tunisia and France.
I've shed light with President Saied on the recent meetings in Cairo and Brussels with my European and Egyptian colleagues. We stressed the ongoing risk of escalation in Libya, which threatens to destabilize the whole region from the Maghreb to the Sahel.
The French Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs also criticized Turkey's agreement with a government of national accord in Libya.
The agreements concluded between the Government of National Accord and Turkey deviate deliberately from international law and aggravate the situation. France, just like Tunisia, supports the representative of the UN Secretary-General, Mr. Salameh, to consolidate international consensus in the upcoming Berlin conference.
Le Drian also addressed the Libyan crisis with Tunisian Parliament Speaker Rashid Al-Ghannouchi.
We have discussed international affairs, and particularly the situation in Libya and the role that France can play and the needed cooperation for peace and stopping the bloodshed.
After recalling the efforts to resolve the Libyan problem peacefully, Tunisian President Kais Saied stressed that the evolution of the situation is not at the level of the efforts made, whether within the framework of the United Nations or through some Western or Arab capitals, including Tunisia. During his meeting with Le Drian, Kais Saied declared that all indicators show that the situation in Libya is likely to become more complex, stressing the need for national preparations for these possible developments to be adequate. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And to Nigeria now, where about 20 soldiers have been killed and nearly 1,000 people displaced from their homes in northeastern Borno State. This happened on Tuesday after terrorists invaded a local government area. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
The Islamic State for West African province, ISWAP, has claimed responsibility for the attack. They gained access into the town of Mongonu disguised as soldiers. They attacked troops, detonated a car bomb inside the military base and burned over 750 houses. Thousands have fled their homes to safety. Mongonu is about 140 kilometers from the capital, Maiduguri. The town was captured by Boko Haram terrorists in January 2015 and later retaken by the military the following month after a coordinated ground and air assault. ISWAP has been staging renewed attacks in the region already ravaged by massive humanitarian catastrophe. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And turning to Mali, 20 people have been wounded after a rocket hit a military base. The attack took place in the town of Tessalit, located in the country's northern Kidal region. The base hosts forces from France, Mali and the United Nations. 18 peacekeepers and 2 civilians are among the wounded. 6 of the peacekeepers were seriously injured. It's not yet known who was behind the attack. Now, a recently published UN report illustrates the severity of attacks in the Sahel and West Africa. The head of the UN's office for that region presented his latest report to the Security Council. Here's more from CGTN's Astatal.
West Africa and the Sahel continue to face the threat of militant groups. Foreign extremist organizations like ISIL and Al-Qaeda have further complicated the security situation.
The West Africa and Sahel region has been shaken by unprecedented terrorist violence in recent months.
Intercommunal conflicts also continue to destabilize the region.
Farmer-herder clashes remain some of the most violent local conflicts in the region. Close to 70% of West Africa's population are dependent on agriculture and livestock rearing for a living. That is why it is so important to ensure peaceful coexistence between farmers and herders. Climate change, among other multiple factors, is increasingly exacerbating farmer-herder conflicts.
As multiple countries head to the polls, including Burkina Faso and Guinea, Chamba stressed the need for security concerns not to distract from political developments. Astatal, CGTN.
The U.S. has imposed sanctions on the first vice president of South Sudan, Taban Deng Gaifor. Gaifor is accused of abducting and killing 2 opposition figures in the country. This is the latest move by Washington to pressure the country's politicians to form a unity government. In a swift response, the government of South Sudan has termed the allegations baseless and unfounded. Last month, the U.S. also sanctioned 5 other South Sudanese officials.
Despite the sanctions strongly imposed on him, His Excellency General Taban Deng Gai pledges to continue to work with the United States and the international community to demonstrate such commitment and to prove the unfounded nature of the allegations against him.
In Iraq now, 2 rockets fell near the U.S. Embassy in the heavily fortified Green Zone in central Baghdad on Wednesday. The rockets were fired less than 24 hours after Iran fired more than a dozen ballistic missiles targeting 2 Iraqi air bases housing U.S. troops in retaliation for the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. In response to the missile attacks, U.S. President Donald Trump said in a televised address there were no Americans harmed and that economic sanctions would be imposed on Iran.
As we continue to evaluate options in response to Iranian aggression, the United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime. These powerful sanctions will remain until Iran changes its behavior. Iran must abandon its nuclear ambitions and end its support for terrorism.
Meanwhile, Turkey's foreign minister is in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad. The Turkish foreign ministry says he wants to de-escalate tensions in the region. Mevlut Çavuşoğlu met with senior Iraqi officials, including Prime Minister Adel Abdul-Mahdi. Turkey shares borders with Iran and Iraq. It's also engaged militarily in northern Iraq, fighting Kurdish forces there, despite repeated protests from the Iraqi government. Turkey has called for calm and expressed concern about regional security after the United States assassinated Iranian General Soleimani. And to Ethiopia now, the country has passed a law that restricts gun ownership. The new law provides for each of the 9 regions in the country to stipulate a legal age for gun ownership. It also limits the number of firearms an individual can own to 1. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoyi reports from Addis Ababa.
Ethiopia has seen an increase in violence in parts of the country since last year, which it partly blames to shootings by unauthorized people. The government says it seized more than 35,000 illegal firearms and ammunition in different parts of the country in 2019. Some citizens have blamed the spread of illegal arms on some groups that returned home from exile under an amnesty extended by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in 2018. Others say security has been relaxed in border points, allowing shipping in of arms. A draft bill in February 2019 declared that a gun bearer must be at least 21 years of age and should only use it in proportion to the use of force. In October 2019, Ethiopia reaffirmed its commitment at the United Nations to combat illicit trafficking of small arms and light weapons. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And moving to the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where some neighborhoods in the capital Kinshasa have been underwater for months now after the Congo River burst its banks due to heavy rainfall. Over 734 people abandoned their homes to seek shelter in places like church compounds. Many are falling ill around the riverside where the water has not yet receded since the initial heavy downpour. Those heavy rains killed at least 39 people in Kinshasa last November.
Paula Bulumbo remembers a time in the past when the relationship with the mighty Congo River felt complementary and never would the water get anywhere near his home. But the heavy rains have changed that, and his house now sits in more than a meter of water.
Look, this is the inside of my house and it's full of water. Come in, don't be worried.
Many fled the area when the flood hit several neighborhoods.
It has been 2 months now since the flooding. We were here and managed to leave. Only today have we come back to assess the situation inside the house since we left everything behind.
Paula refused to go, deciding to make changes for his family's survival.
I fixed some rafters here to create a space to sleep, because we had to leave the bedroom, which is full of water. And here as well, I did the same thing for the children.
The taxi driver by trade swapped his motorbike for a canoe that he now uses to ferry people around the streets turned rivers.
It has been a long time. A very long time since this kind of thing happened. It's been maybe 15 years. It really took us by surprise in 2019. Almost all the houses that you see here are empty now.
The National Agency for the Weather and Satellite Remote Detection, Metelsat, said they have seen a net increase in rainfall over the last few years.
The DRC is no exception when it comes to climate change. What we're seeing is precisely the effects of climate change and of global warming.
The climate change profile from the Dutch Foreign Ministry in 2018 said that climate change is expected to increase current vulnerabilities within the DRC. The report estimates rainfall will increase in the east and northeast, and temperatures are likely to go up by 1 to 3 degrees Celsius between 2010 and 2050. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan hold the last round of talks over the Grand Renaissance Dam. And on the brink of famine, Zimbabwe steps up its maize imports.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The The water ministers of Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan are holding what is their final round of talks on issues regarding the filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam and its operation. Now, it's hoped these talks will settle the long unresolved and contentious issues. CGTN's Gurum Chala has more.
All the three water and irrigation ministers of Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan have arrived to their meeting venue early Wednesday morning. Then the meeting begins. All ministers have delivered their speech, and they said this round of talks is critical and must end with success.
It is an opportunity and responsibility of water ministers to show to our people and the governments that there is a technical solution for a technical problem. The GERD negotiation, no matter how complex from the point of view of hydrology, potential occurrence of drought and flood, operation, challenge of lacking clarity on cooperation mechanism, we can surmount the problem if we genuinely put our minds together.
We have come here today with some ideas and some concepts that we hope can contribute to reaching a comprehensive, cooperative and mutually beneficial agreement on the filling and operation of the GERD in accordance with the 2015 Agreement on Declaration of Principles.
Let us build on what has been achieved and try to reach consensus on key points. Of course, we understand that GERD issues are interlinked, but the approach of breaking into key points or subsystems makes the deliberation much more structured and hence much more productive.
But there are still doubts from at least the Egyptian side that the filling process and timetable of Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam could lower the water it gets from the Nile. In response, Ethiopia, through the Water, Energy and Irrigation Minister, reiterated there is no hidden agenda of harming any country, including Egypt.
Ethiopia provided over 150 design and study documents of GERD to Egypt and Sudan, deliberated and examined the documents for a year in a transparent manner with participation of international experts from Britain, France, Germany and South Africa. This proactive gesture of Ethiopia has helped in keeping the dialogue alive among the technical experts of Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan.
This meeting is being attended by representatives of the U.S. government and the World Bank as observers. Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam is under construction 24/7. The $4+ billion dam is expected to have a reservoir which will hold about 74 billion cubic meters of water to generate the close to 6,000 megawatts of electricity. The hope now is the three countries will agree on a timetable to fill the reservoir without affecting water flow or cause a delay for power generation. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is on a two-day official visit to the Republic of Guinea. As CGTN's Brian Toussaint reports, the visit seeks to strengthen bilateral ties between the two nations.
Upon his arrival, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was welcomed by Ghanaian President Alpha Condé. The two leaders held closed meetings in the capital, Conakry, after which they toured the city's iconic places.
Last year, the president paid an official visit during the Summit of Heads of State. It was also planned that the Prime Minister would also visit, and he is now doing so to confirm all the cooperation frameworks that were signed last year. There will be no agreement to be signed, but a review of these agreements and possible consolidation.
The two leaders agreed to bolster cooperation agreements signed in 2019 between the two countries. The agreements focus on areas of education, health, financial management, agriculture, culture, and tourism.
It's always a great honor for the Ministry of Transport, especially for the autonomous port of Conakry. Every time the President receives a distinguished guest, he takes him on a tour of our facilities, especially the container terminal, because it's an entity that works very well. We compete with others in the sub-region. It's a symbol of the real economic takeoff of our country. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia was pleasantly impressed by the facilities he found here. He also received a gift from the workers who are gathered here. Once again, we are very pleased.
During his stay in the Republic of Guinea, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed also met with Governor El Rufai of Kaduna State, Nigeria, and Nigerian business tycoon Tony Olumalu to discuss investment opportunities in Ethiopia in various burgeoning sectors. Mr. Abiy heads next to South Africa for a two-day official state visit. The visit aims to strengthen the diplomatic relations between the two countries and boost ties. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Zimbabwe has been stepping up maize imports to avert an impending crisis. The World Food Programme says its reserves of food aid could run dry by February. That's the peak of the lean season, leaving millions at risk. CGTN's Farai Makutoya reports.
Zimbabwe's treasury has doubled maize imports from $1.1 million in September to $4 million in response to an increase in the number of people left vulnerable by a severe drought. The Information Ministry says government has set aside a total of $1 billion Zimbabwe dollars, about $58 million for rural and urban food aid. This follows indications by the World Food Programme that the number of people in need of aid will exceed 8 million, more than half the country's population.
So we are under 50% of the CER's requirement between now and June. And therefore, you see the spike in the food insecurity levels.
The UN agency is in a race to bring in the required grain in time for the lean season before the next harvest, which also hangs in the balance. A prolonged mid-season dry spell has scorched the land and left many farmers, including Innocent Chinema, helplessly looking on at their withering crops.
The situation is now desperate. It's been too long since it has rained here. The heat has destroyed most of what we planted.
He's not sure how he will survive if the situation remains the same.
If it doesn't rain in the next week, then there is no hope. We will lose everything. The crops, fertilizer, pesticides and other inputs will all be a complete waste.
The Meteorological Services Department has, not for the first time, forecast impending storms. But given that previous predictions haven't materialized, not all farmers here are convinced. Time is running out quickly, and unless the skies open up very soon, Zimbabwe won't be replenishing its silos this year, but instead sending out an SOS for more food assistance. Farai Makutoya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's go to Nigeria now, where the country's president has recently approved an allocation of $100 million for the renovation of the country's National Assembly. The move has been met with massive rejection and public outcry. Groups have headed to the courts to prevent the federal government from dispersing funds for the project. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more on this story.
37 billion naira, or $100 million. That's what President Buhari is signing off for the renovation of the National Assembly complex. It's contained in the 2020 budget. But that is not going down well with a coalition of civil society organizations and hundreds of concerned Nigerians. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, is one of the many groups strongly against such spending. Jointly, they've sued the federal government. They want the court to stop the authorities from releasing the funds.
So why would we budget so much for expenditure that is not beneficial, at least not directly, to the average Nigerian, when these funds could be better used for social infrastructure? We have amenities such as roads and water and electricity that is epileptic, that's best. So we believe these funds should be more properly used.
Lawmakers are adamant that the project must go on in spite of mounting public opposition. Their argument, For nearly 20 years, no major renovation work has been carried out on the complex, which is a national monument. The National Assembly complex was built in the late 1990s with $35 million and its second phase completed in 2011. And in 2013, nearly 40 billion naira was budgeted for further construction and renovation works. But key infrastructure agencies have gotten less allocations.
The members of the National Assembly took an oath of office upon assumption of their seats in the National Assembly to strive to make laws in the interest and prosperity of Nigerians. And that we believe that such is being breached by this appropriation. This appropriation cannot be said to be the interest of Nigerians, and that we believe we have a strong legal basis for approaching the court.
Many Nigerians who are challenging the renovation allocation insist that the funds should rather go to improve critical sectors like education, security, health, and housing. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The African Consortium on Waste Management has launched in Tunisia. Officials and experts from across the continent gathered to discuss challenges in the sector. Experts also discussed innovative solutions to waste management in Africa.
The Tunisian CEO of the German-Swiss African Consortium will set up 5 waste processing and transformation units in coastal regions in the North African country.
By uniting our expertise, we will process and manage municipal solid waste, as well as toxic or hazardous waste from hospitals and the petrochemical industries, which represent potential threats to public health and the environment.
The new units will be established in 7 African countries to produce substitute or refuse-derived fuel, RDF. Tunisia will provide equipment to set up the recycling plants.
This is an economic and environmental project which is part of the effort to fight global warming. We'll manage and recycle waste in order to valorize it by producing electrical energy and fertilizer.
The African Consortium plans to set up factories in Algeria to recycle waste. This sector will have a direct impact on the economy and create thousands of jobs in the North African country.
Waste treatment was not a consideration in the past. Tons of waste were buried instead. There was no concrete waste recycling system or program. Waste collectors, like municipalities, practiced landfill. Consequently, Algeria had enormous or astronomical quantities of waste that should be extracted, sorted and recycled.
The Swiss-German and African group announced in June 2013 the creation of 25 waste recycling centers in Tunisia. The project was not carried out due to social instability. This project is now considered as a top priority for the new government. Experts assert that the new recycling units in Tunisia and other African countries will help cut the expenses of cement plants and building materials companies by 30%. The modern units will transform waste into energy to be reused in energy-intensive industries. Adnan Shawachi, CGTN, Tunis.
The death toll from bushfires in southeastern Australia has now risen to 27. New evacuation notices and warnings have been issued in areas where people might be in the path of the fires, with high winds and hot temperatures expected to worsen the situation. CGTN's Greg Navarro has more from Sydney.
An urgent plea from Victorian leaders for people living in fire-affected parts of the state to heed evacuation warnings ahead of worsening weather conditions expected in the days ahead.
We can't guarantee your safety, and we don't want to be putting emergency services, whether it be volunteers or paid staff, we do not want to be putting them in harm's way because people didn't follow the advice that was given.
A brief break in the weather earlier in the week allowed homeowners to assess the damage.
It's devastating. You know, so many livelihoods been gone up.
And firefighters to assess what has become an unstoppable foe.
It is too large to put out. Anything that we're doing just isn't working. And that's with all the aircraft as well. We can slow it down, but yeah, very hard to stop.
There are 27 confirmed fatalities, and there have been
on this morning's reports to us, 2,131 homes lost, but I'm sure over the course of the day, as further damage assessments have been undertaken, particularly in Victoria, these numbers continue to sadly change and they continue to escalate.
Reserves, good on you. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced the call-up of 1,600 Defence reservists assigned to bushfire assistance.
We're a long way from the end of this crisis and this disaster, and their pre-positioning along the coast is very important. These are significant assets with significant capabilities and provide a staging post to render any amount of assistance as required.
She's eating fine.
Part of recovery efforts for military personnel included tending to injured animals on Kangaroo Island, where fires have scorched a third of the island and continue to burn.
It's a pretty grim picture, unfortunately. There's a lot of wildlife, a lot of livestock, and a few companion animals that have been affected by the fires.
Scientists are beginning to look at the long-term effects from these fires, and in particular, the impacts to drinking supplies. They say that those impacts won't be fully realized until areas receive a very soaking intense rain that could end up washing ash covering the ground here and elsewhere, as well as eroded soil into waterways. In the short term, Australia's official weather agency says there are no signs of any meaningful rain in the next few months. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
And let's now go to Raman Young for your latest business news.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Here's what's coming up in business. Friends and colleagues of victims of the Ukrainian passenger jet that crashed in Iran are still coming to terms with the tragedy. And the World Bank slashes global growth forecast for 2019 and 2020. We'll take a look at the latest numbers. Welcome back to the program. Friends and colleagues of victims of the Ukrainian passenger jet that crashed in Iran shortly after takeoff on Wednesday are still overwhelmed with grief. Now, that crash killed at least 63 Canadian nationals. Many of them were international students at universities across Canada. At least 138 passengers out of 176 on that flight, on that particular plane, a Boeing 737-800, were essentially connecting to Canada. The country's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau vowed that his government will get answers, and he of course did add that they're reaching out to international counterparts in order to deal with the aftermath.
It is with deep sadness that the University of Alberta community learned that at least 10 members of our broader community died in last night's tragic plane crash in Iran. This includes students, faculty, and alumni. On behalf of the University of Alberta, to everyone who has been affected, words simply cannot express the grief that we are feeling on campus. We're a close-knit community, and we grieve when everyone is touched by such terrible loss.
Hanemat was just a very inspiring woman, she was a joy for all of us. Very powerful and determined and clear in her mind, ready to support anywhere she could support someone or some cause for our work.
Now, the crash does raise new questions for the plane maker, Boeing, which of course is still reeling from the crisis involving its long-grounded 737 MAX jet. The affected plane was an earlier model, however, the predecessor to the MAX, the 737-800, which of course did crash shortly after takeoff. To be clear, it's still too early to know exactly what caused the accident and whether Boeing bears any responsibility for the incident. At a minimum, though, this disaster does add to the burden of the work facing Boeing's incoming CEO, David Calhoun, as he tries to repair the iconic plane maker's balance sheet and, more importantly, its reputation with regulators, airlines and passengers. Boeing has issued a short statement saying that it is gathering more information on this incident and it is ready to help the Ukrainian carrier in any way.
Boeing is one of those quintessential companies that every time people predict its demise, they're almost always wrong, right? So if you remember about 8-9 years ago, Boeing was reconfiguring its supply chain, and the stock had dipped down almost to $45. And now we are at over $300. And in that meantime, while the Dow Jones has gone up by about 180%, Boeing stock has gone up by more than 400%. And then we also looked at how customers feel about Boeing. So media coverage is one thing. What we really care about is what Boeing's customers think about Boeing. And in terms of Boeing, customers give it an 85 percentile rating. So I think Boeing needs to keep up with its same strategy, which is be very open and transparent in its communication with all stakeholders, roll out the red carpet in terms of its ongoing service and support, and triple down on safety. It's going through a tough time, but Boeing is also insulated by the fact that it has a good history with its customers who have generally been satisfied with its products and services, and they will pull through for Boeing.
Now, the World Bank has trimmed global growth forecasts for 2019 and 2020. It attributes a reduction to a much slower than expected recovery in trade and investment. Now, the bank says that 2019 marked the weakest economic expansion since the global financial crisis a decade ago. The report, which was released early on Wednesday, also says that 2020 remains vulnerable to many uncertainties in trade and geopolitical tensions. So look at the numbers now. The bank shaved 0.2 percentage points off growth for both years, with the 2019 global economic growth forecast at 2.4% and 2020's barely different 2.5%. The report also says advanced economies are expected to decline slightly as far as their growth is concerned. Emerging markets, however, are focused to improve in aggregate. China's growth rate is forecast to decelerate to 5.9% in 2020. That's 0.2 percentage points lower than the World Bank's June forecast. And it comes as China continues to deal with the fallout from US tariffs. Now, staff at the foreign exchange firm Travelex are back to using pen and paper, serving thousands of clients around the world, after the company said that hackers managed to infect their systems with ransomware. Welcome to the new normal. This, of course, led to a global blackout in online currency exchange services. The trader does provide FX trading services for a range of institutional customers: HSBC, Barclays, Virgin Money, and the banking arms of the British retailers Tesco and Sainsbury. Now, the spread of the ransomware, which Travelex now says it has successfully contained, forced the company to take all of its systems offline. The company has a presence in more than 70 countries. It is currently only able, however, to serve customers face-to-face at 1,200 locations worldwide. Travelex says there was no evidence yet that any data was stolen, but there is a criminal investigation underway now. It's led by London's Metropolitan Police. On to East Africa now. The deadline for the use of old format passports in Tanzania has been set at the end of January. And the number of Tanzanians who are applying for replacements has dramatically increased to an average of 1,200 applications a day, from between 300 to 400 per day. CGTN's Daniel Kijo reports. Here's the latest on that rush to beat the deadline.
The Tanzanian government first announced citizens would need to process new electronic passports 2 years ago, and it gave citizens up to 31st January 2020 to get the new passports, and until that date is when the old passports won't be used. As it stands, so many citizens have been coming up. The number of people coming to get the new passports has doubled, if not tripled.
We had 2 stations, that means here at Kurasin, Dar es Salaam, and the Immigration Area Office in Zanzibar. Right now we have almost 31 stations all over the countries for the Tanzanian citizens to exchange their passports. Also, we just go abroad and we opened almost 44 stations for our Tanzanian embassy abroad. The exercise just goes well and smoothly here, so we just continue with the exercise.
Richard, tell me, you have these new passports. How do you feel? How has been the process to get them, considering there seems to be a lot of people here?
Yeah, I'm very happy that I have my electronic passport today. And despite of seeing so many people around here, but the speed of processing the documents here is very high, and I'm very encouraged to see that the time taken to process is too short.
Why do you think some Tanzanians, most of them, waited to these last days? Now there's a rush. What is it? Life? Is it work? What is it?
No, according to my opinion, I think they are afraid maybe there is a lot of things to be done here. But I wanted to encourage them that once you have all the information required, then you can just get your passport within a short period.
Thank you so much, sir. Once you have all the information required, you just have to come to the immigration office here and you'll be able to process and get your new electronic passport, which is said to have more advanced safety features. Reporting from Dar es Salaam is Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Now, tech is becoming far more portable, distributed, and way more affordable as cheaper and smaller sensors and batteries come to market. Chinese tech companies have played quite a role in that trend. CGTN's Mark New has the latest from the 2020 edition of CES.
At CES, sensors are getting so portable they can now even be used on a baby's diaper.
We have developed a proprietary algorithm that will know like when to detect when the diaper is wet.
A great deal of innovation at the show is coming from Chinese tech companies. At a CES special event called China Tech First Look, Chinese companies take center stage.
Islam is widely used in travelers' vehicles.
Sometimes surprises come in small packages, like the e-bike Small Circle.
What is a Smart Circle? Smart Circle is the world's lightest and smallest foldable electric bike in the world. It's good for the last mile and the first mile transportation.
In seconds, it unfolds to reveal a uniquely designed bike that weighs just under 11 kilograms. The battery serves as the seat, and it's got some kick, hitting speeds of up to 48 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
Chinese computer maker Lenovo unveiled 40 products at CES, including reintroducing the Motorola Razr flip phone, which now has a bendable OLED screen.
And that same OLED screen technology is incorporated into the ThinkPad X1 Fold. Lenovo has created the world's first foldable PC. It took engineers 4 years to create this flexible hinge, which allows it to fold seamlessly without any crease.
The OLED technology is coming to the point where you really can build products with foldable screens. But you have to put a lot of engineering into the hinges, so the product really has the durability to do this tens of thousands of times. And ultimately, the foldable device gives you multiple modes, in a book mode, in a dual screen mode, in a full screen mode, where you really can work very productively.
Lenovo also unveiled another first, a laptop that actually has a screen right on the cover. It's all part of the drive to create new form factors that allow users to stay connected in ways they never thought before. Mark New, CGTN, Las Vegas.
And you can expect more of that at the top of the hour. Later in Global Business, investigations are going on into the cause of the downing of the Ukrainian plane that crashed just after takeoff from Tehran on Wednesday. We'll be exploring that and plenty more live from Washington, D.C., Addis Ababa and Cairo as well. Plenty of stories coming up at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Rama. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, we look at how costly traditional weddings in Nigeria are pushing young couples to embrace cohabitation. In Nigeria, traditional weddings can be a costly and exhausting affair. And that's what's pushing young couples to embrace less conventional unions, including cohabitation without being married. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam takes a look at the trend, popularly known as "Come We Stay" relationships.
An ongoing traditional marriage ceremony called Ibanku in Nigeria's eastern region. It's translated to mean wine-carrying ceremony. It's the formal wedding day by tradition, usually very colorful, festive, and very expensive too. As part of the custom, intended grooms must fulfill marital rites to receive the consent and blessings of the bride's family. And depending on the community, A groom may need up to $4,000 or even more to complete all the marriage rites. And this is just one of the steps in the string of processes in fulfilling the marriage rites.
I called my in-law because that time I was not here in the country. So I called him, and I bless God that the man, he is somebody who understands life. I explained everything to him. He told me that I don't have problem, that if I can be able to send my parents to come, and one of my uncle, that because normally you have first of all the introduction first, and the second you have to come for the second time again before the bride price and the traditional marriage. So they came twice. They came here 2 times without me. So the third time I came by myself, and the bride price was paid.
The cost of marriages are making more young couples shy away. They'd rather move in together and start a family. But the consequences are grave. Those unions are neither recognized by tradition nor by law.
That society is strong when we have strong marriages, because in a sweet home where values are kept, morals are kept, children that will come up that marriage will be not 100%, but on a scale from 0 to, say, 9, will be maybe on the 8, good, have values and all of that.
So you have to make a move. Don't relax there and be giving, because if you have not paid the bride price of a lady, and the lady is like you are staying with the lady, and the lady has their children for you, if anything happens to that lady, you stand to regret it.
Nigerians are very big on maintaining traditional standards when it comes to marriages. So much that in the event of death, a cohabiting partner and the children do not have rights to inheritance. Now, many have been pushing to set a baseline bride price for communities across the country. But that seems very unlikely for a multicultural society like Nigeria. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Enugu, Nigeria.
And here's what's coming up in your sports news up next. Egyptian couple Ahmed Kamar and Maggy Ash-mawy shoot their way into stardom.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
In your sports news, the 2019 African Games in Morocco saw the introduction of mixed gender shooting as one of the 26 disciplines. Egyptian couple Ahmed Kamar and Maggy Ash-mawy emerged the winners at the Games before adding the African Shooting Championship title to their accolades in November last year. CGTN's Adel Al-Makhraoui has more.
Ahmed and Maggy are spending the day in Egypt's shooting club. But unlike most married couples, they're not here to socialize and have lunch. Both enter the arms room, set up their shotguns and get ready for training. Shooting was the sport that brought them together.
We met through the sport. We would often meet during the similar training sessions that we had. Then we started agreeing to train together with our friends. We joined the club's team, but the coach didn't bring us together because we were married. It's because we were both top shooters. It's only to protect our performance.
Ahmed Kamar started shooting when he was 10. Inspired by his father, Kamar quickly grew to become a national champion and one of the most recognized athletes in the national team. He was the first in Egypt to rank 5th in the Olympics. Maggy started the sport way after him. Shortly after she began in 2010, her talent blossomed. She's the first Egyptian woman to reach 4th place in the World Championship. The duo have been recently popular for winning Africa's first mixed-gender trap event.
We were surprised about 2 years ago when the International Federation introduced the mixed event. We've never played together before. In the African Games in Morocco, that was the first time. The coach was concerned that we might distract each other. It was a new experience for us all.
Being together in Morocco has actually pushed them to perform better. Beside their mixed title, the wife and the husband both won the gold medal in singles as well. They know it will take a lot of hard work to stay teamed up together in the national team.
The court chose us to be together. We had nothing to do with it. Our marriage has developed a connection between us, no doubt. But at the end of the day, it's the national team coach's call. If any one of us is not a top performer, he can pair us with another team member.
Last month, Maggy won a new gold medal in the African Championship. Ahmed got a silver. Egypt has won 2 spots for trap shooting in both genders in the upcoming 2020 Olympics. A local competition between national team players will decide if these shooting stars will bring an Egyptian sparkle to Tokyo. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In your cricket news, South African captain Faf du Plessis has called on his young squad to wrestle back the series when they play England in the remaining 2 tests in Port Elizabeth and Johannesburg. England claimed a hard-fought 187-run victory over South Africa to level the 4-match series 1-1 on Tuesday. The 5-day contest saw both teams battle it out, but in the end, it was the visitors who triumphed in a great advertisement for the game. His opposite number, Joe Root, hailed the famous Barmy Army, the travelling England supporters who were desperate to see their team end their long wait for victory at the picturesque Newlands. The 3rd test starts on Thursday next week, where the winner will take a huge step to clinching the series.
Extremely proud of how we fought. You know, you never want to lose test matches. Of course, you don't want to. But the challenge that we had to our group last night and this morning was that we will fight with everything that we've got within us to try and make England do anything and everything to beat us, and they have. They've thrown the kitchen sink at us, and just towards the end of the day, unfortunately, needed to be a loser, which has been a fantastic 5 days of test cricket.
It's all right saying you want to do things, but guys have to step up and deliver that, and I thought we were brilliant. Collectively, we all bought into it and delivered it fantastically well this time round. So I think it's the right method. It's what suits the group of players that we've got. We're going to have bumps in the road because we have got a young squad of players, but we're learning quickly, and this is a great example that the right group is here on this tour, and that we more than capable of winning away from home.
In your football news, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid was played as a one-off game in Tangier, Morocco. Last year, the Spanish Football Federation made a raft of changes by doubling the number of teams, moving the competition